Kenya, there is an expression: peace is costly, but it is worth the expense. Our next guest, Dr. Karim Errouaki, translates that sentiment into scholarship with detailed studies into the economics of climate change, the oil economy, fundamentalism and terrorism, and the global drug trade. Dr. Errouaki is Vice Prime Minister and Minister of Finance, Foreign Affairs and International Development, the State of the African Diaspora, President Emeritus of the American University of Europe, and former Special Advisor to the UNSG, late Professor Boutros Ghali. Please welcome Dr. Karim Errouaki.
Well, thank you, Mike. Well, first of all, I would like to thank the whole team and the organizer of this magnificent conference on global peace education, empowering educator for peace. We are fully aware that the purpose of this conference is to promote and to campaign for the establishment of the Peace Education Day to demonstrate the positive impact peace education upon the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Let me remind the viewers that indeed the United Nations has established more than 150 international days for different humanitarian themes. However, there is no day dedicated solely to peace education. Let me recall here also that there is two important days, one related to peace, which has been established on September the 21st, 1981, as the International Day of Peace. And the second one about education, which was established on January the 24th, 2018 by His Excellency, the United Nations Secretary General, Antonio Guterres. Because peace is central to the United Nations mission, an official UN Day should be dedicated to promote peace education throughout the world. Personally, as the Vice Prime Minister and the Minister of Finance, Foreign Affairs and International Development of the State of the African Diaspora, as well as an educator and President Emeritus of the American University of Europe, and also as a co-founder with my colleagues, Professor Federico Mayor Saragossa, Professor Nobel Laureate Robert Mundell, and Professor Edward Nell, with the Director General of CAFRAD, Professor Stefan Mani Monju, of the International Advisory Committee of CAFRAD, in Pan-African Intergovernmental Organization, as well as a peace advocate for years, working very closely with Professor Federico Mayor Foundation Culture of Peace. I am really committed to promoting grassroots for peace education initiative and starting to share the peace education curricula and best practice from around the world. I also like to take this opportunity to pay tribute to my mentors and who are outstanding scholars, scientists, and mainly advocate of peace and great educator, the late Professor Boutros Ghali, United Nations Secretary General, the late Dr. John Bradamas, former President Emeritus of NYU, and also the former Majority Whip at the United States House of Commons, late Nobel Laureate Professor Robert Mundell, Professor Edward Nell, and obviously my mentor, Professor Federico Mayor Saragossa, the former Director General of UNESCO. They have been my guiding spirits for the promotion of culture of peace and peace education. Let me go back just to define my vision as the Vice Prime Minister of the State of the African Diaspora, nickname SOAD, to expose our vision. Well, first of all, I would like to say that the diaspora, the African diaspora, is the term commonly used to define, to describe the mass dispersion of the people from Africa, the dispersion of peoples from Africa during the transatlantic slave trade from 1500s to the 1800s. This diaspora took millions of people from Western and Central Africa of different regions to go to the Americas and the Caribbean. The State of the African Diaspora vision talks of peaceful and prosperous Africa integrated, led its own citizen and occupying the place it deserves in the global community and the knowledge economy. So for us, peace education is crucial to achieving this vision and entails fostering attitude that promotes mutual understanding, tolerance, and respect, which in turn makes societies less susceptible to violent conflict. Education and peace education also provide a sense of normalcy and routine for children and adults after the trauma of violent conflict. Investing in peace through education is therefore strategic as it promotes resilience and mitigates violent conflict as well as violent extremism. The case of Europe is a classical example. Peace and security are critical ingredient in the socio-economic development of any nation. Violent conflicts hamper economic development and reinforce inequalities, grievance, and desperation, trapping countries in a very vicious cycle of violence. On the other hand, on the issue related to the role of peace education, allow me just to make some few observations that could be of great importance and relevancy to what I'm trying to develop here. My first observation, as Federico Mayor Zaragoza, the former Director General of UNESCO, argued, a culture of peace, I'm quoting him, will be achieved when citizens of the world understand global problems, have the skills to resolve conflicts constructively, know and live by international standards of human rights, gender and racial equality, and appreciate cultural diversity and respect of the integrity of the earth. Such learning cannot be achieved without international, sustained, and systematic education for peace. Let me add another important point. Education is the single most important means for empowerment and sustained involvement in all well-being. Sustainable development is a basic human right, and unless this target is reached with the potent tool of education, the purpose of education would remain unfulfilled. So therefore, building a culture of peace and learning to live together is the responsibility of everyone, and education is the principle, and this is the principle and would remain, is the principle and must develop social, emotional, and ethical values. Africa, as a continent, has features continuously in the world news due to frequent conflict and violence, where lives and properties have been destroyed. And the most recent instability, for example, in West Africa, is very disturbing. We had experienced first military coup in Mali, second military coup in Guinea, a third one in Burkina Faso, and other countries, which really have caused tremendous social unrest, and which has also put tremendous problem for the peace building and the role of our the state of the African diaspora is to help establishing the democratic value and the peace in those important West African countries. In the case, for example, of the role we have been playing tremendously was the case of Guinea-Conakry, where through the effort of our colleague, myself, my humble self, and the Minister of Budget and Public Accounts, my colleague, Mr. Amar Aitmoufouk, my colleague, the Ambassador of SOAD, Mr. Lansini Sako, and also with the collaboration and the help of our Prime Minister, our friend, Dr. Louis-Georges Tin, we have been able to lobby tremendously with the community to free Professor Alpha Conde for hospitalizations, to go to first to Dubai, to Abu Dhabi, and then to Turkey. That was a contribution in terms of trying through dialogue, as the Madame Gabriela Ramos calls recently, she advocates the importance of dialogue to resolve humanity's challenges, and his remark as peace building skills, and how can dialogue be utilized to strengthen multinational economic commitment and action to rebuild war destroyed area of Africa and Middle East. And we have been playing an extremely important role. And also the state of the African diaspora has created, under the leadership of the Prime Minister, Dr. Louis-Georges Tin, the Royal Chamber with the purpose and mission to resolve conflict and peace building. And we had the honor that Royal Chamber, the current chairman is the president of the African Union, and the members are very important institutions and players, like, for example, the High Council of King of Africa, the High Council of Wise Man of Africa. And the idea is through dialogue and respect of tradition, we can reach peaceful solutions to conflict zone. This is one of the actions that our young state of the African diaspora took recently as initiative, and we invited the military giant of that did the military coup in Guinea to join this Royal Chamber and to find a solution through dialogue with all the wise men of Guinea and the people important the political party. We are still concerned about the life of our dear friend, colleague, the former Prime Minister Ibrahima Kassouri Fofana. He is still in jail since April. And also our friend, the former governor of the central bank, Professor Lansini Nabe, who is really very, very ill and required immediate evacuation for heart surgery. So those are humanitarian challenges that we are trying to tackle with the dialogue and peaceful solution. So this is one of the most important, for example, action we took recently. We are still looking forward to establish a strong dialogue with all the countries where there is some kind of social unrest. It's very important to understand that in the case of Africa, the state of peace and security on the African continent remain very preoccupying phenomenon to the rest of world continents. It is very important to develop the peace of culture and peace education in this region. And for example, in our case, we have an online university, the SOAD University, that has the mission to develop peace education. And peace education, it's not anymore a luxury, it's really a must issue that we have to tackle and take very seriously. And we are hoping that the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres will give us his full support to launch this special moment in the history of culture of peace, which is the establishment of the the International Peace Education Day with God will. And thank you very much. My endorsement for the launching of the United Nations International Peace Education Day. And thank you, Mr. Secretary General of the United Nations.